This is episode 10 of season 2 of the Slowdown, which is pretty unbelievable. We're coming up at to the end of the season, aren't we?
Yep, 2 more episodes, then we'll do a new show.
Yeah, that's gonna be pretty cool. And yeah, we'll talk more about what that new show is later on. But I'm pretty excited about it.
Awesome. You got enough sleep?
No, never. I was up till I was up at the 4:15, I think, today.
Wow.
But, well, I went to bed at 9:15 last night, so that's about 7 hours. That's good.
That's good.
Yeah, that's like an hour more than I usually get, but it was a long day, and I realized something. It must have been exactly a month ago or 4 Sundays ago that we were talking, because the last film we talked about involved beach and water scenes, and the film we're talking about tonight involves beach and water scenes, because I was actually at the beach in the water for both shows, or leading up to both shows. So that's very exciting.
Awesome.
Tonight we're talking about All the Light in the Sky for the Slowdown.
That's a lot of light.
It is 2012 by Joe Swanberg. What's your history with Swanberg? Have you seen all of his movies? Are you a fan?
Well, yeah, I followed his career since he started making movies. I'm trying not to get distracted by the large image of me.
Yes, you are in your fancy new Mac computer, broadcasting live from space. Yeah,
that's right. No, I need to figure out how to hide this popping up, but I'll just get used to it. Yeah. So, all right. Actually, just give me 1 second to see if I can hide it. It's better that way. Okay. All right. I'll get used to it. It's just like performing.
All right. So yeah.
All right. So about Swanberg, yeah, I got he sent me his first movie.
Oh.
Because I was blogging on IndieWire. My blog, DIY Filmmaker, was being carried on IndieWire. So a bunch of filmmakers would always send me movies. So 2005, he sent me his first movie, Kissing on the Mouth, to check it out. I checked it out, and it was just felt like nothing, like like a very simple story. I was like, well, it's interesting. I don't really get it, and I think that was the response by a lot of older filmmakers and critics when he first came out. And then, South by Southwest and other festivals supported him. Some critics supported him, like Richard Brody, and others didn't. Others hated him, actually, and went on and on about it. But from a filmmaker's perspective, me and other older filmmakers, we were like, this is interesting. He's doing, him and mumblecore filmmakers, especially him, he was making a lot of movies really fast. Like in 2007 or maybe 11, at some point, he made like 6 features in like 1 year, 6 or 7 features. So that's just unheard of, up to that point in the narrative indie filmmaking space.
Was he shooting on film at this, or was he shooting digitally?
No, digitally.
Okay.
He started with digital. Eventually, he made some stuff on 16 millimeter, but a lot of his movies were shot on digital. But very unique filmmaker, and he improvises a lot. And I didn't like a lot of his movies, I didn't like or dislike them. I just didn't connect with them. But I did like a few movies, some of his later ones, like this one we're about to talk about, All the Light in the Sky. And he did was it Marriage Material? Might have been Marriage Material, where it was shot in Chicago and he used a static camera. And I think that was done maybe a couple of movies prior to this one that we're about to talk about. That one looked good. I was like, okay, this I can get with. I can sort of observe these characters. Not much of a story, but it's interesting. So, since I'm into slow cinema, I got into it. So that's, and one other thing was him and a bunch of other mumblecore filmmakers were presented at a film festival in 2007 at the IFC Center. New York Times wrote about it, a bunch of other people wrote about it. I complained on my blog saying no non-white or female filmmakers were included. That would have been nice, because all this publicity will help build, careers, which I was correct. Almost every filmmaker who was included 10 years later is in a very good position. So that led off to, this is 10 years before, this is 2007. This was about 10 years before Oscars being so white. And that discussion led to South by Southwest discovering Barry Jenkins, his first movie, which we're going to talk about in the next episode, which is, what's the title? Do you recall?
Not off the top of my head. I think I've got it here somewhere, but
yeah, whatever. His first title, it's not coming to me. He's only made he's made a bunch of movies now. But I wanted to say Permanent Midnight, but that's not it.
No, that's
Medicine for Melancholy.
That's right. Okay, yeah.
But then 10 years later, Barry Jenkins wins the Oscar for the best movie or best director. So, and a lot of those filmmakers who played that festival in 2007, Swanberg included, went on to include minority actors in their movies. So I think at first they were like, "Oh, don't criticize us for that." Later on, even Swanberg said, "Yeah, you kind of get used to working with people. It only takes a little bit of effort to open up the process to bring in other people."
Sure. I mean, it's good to bring awareness to it, but I don't know, it's always kind of not a weird argument to me, but I don't know that it's as simple as black and white as when, people complain about, well, there's all these white filmmakers getting this publicity, especially up and comers, because as you just said, you kind of, you work with who you know and what you know. And if that's the environment you come up in,
Well, we have, I mean, I wasn't necessarily criticizing the filmmakers only for the casting choices because they lived in major cities, they had non-white friends, blah, blah, blah. But the organizers and promoters and the critics, no one really made a big deal out of it being, mostly white movies. But this comes out of hundreds some years of mostly white movies, right? So by the time 2007 rolls around, we have digital filmmaking. Spike Lee's been on the scene for about 30 years, maybe or so. So we know a lot of these movies are made in New York. We know it's possible to include minorities in movies. So that push, I mean, people have been complaining about it for a long time. I think it's a valid concern. I think, not including any large group of people. And by that time, 2007, we had 100 million minority residents or citizens in the US. So
okay.
That's a huge number, right? So,
well, sure. But I mean, if you are, a young filmmaker and you're starting out, and you want to tell a story about, say, your life, and you grew up in the white suburbs, or you grew up in an area of New York where, your story is about the 5 friends you grew up with on your block, and you didn't have any, black or Latino main characters in your life or in your story, it might just be weird to put, to kind of shoehorn in, almost like stunt casting or something, because you're trying to appeal to, what other people think should be in your movie. I'm not on board with that. I'm all for I'm for diversity in movies. It's an uncomfortable argument to me when people say, well, there should be, this percentage of people or these, this race or whatever represented in movies. There is representation in movies, and there are people making films. Now, I think the spotlight that's put on filmmakers, that's a completely separate issue. I think that's kind of what we're talking about with, Swanberg and the other kind of mumblecore getting the attention.
Yeah, because I don't know why I said physically, but I literally knew other filmmakers who were doing similar work, who were non-white, not male, who were not being included in these discussions. So that's why I made that point, saying let's broaden up a bit. And the indie scene quickly adapted, and other people were saying the same thing. And some critics were saying the same thing also. The indie scene quickly adapted long before Hollywood, about 10 years before.
Well, yeah, because the studio system takes, it's this giant machine. It takes forever to catch up with, with the tides of history.
Yeah, now things evolving naturally, and people just showing their white or black lives naturally would be a good argument if we didn't have slavery, segregation, codes, and actual agreements in Hollywood that exclude minority talent until Spike Lee kind of forced them to do it. He said, I need minority talent in my movies. You got to let them into the unions. They weren't even being let into the unions. So
But what do you like? What time period you're talking about here?
85, 86.
Right, but I mean that was like almost 40 years ago.
I know, but not much had changed in that
Right, but
time
I'm saying independent, like up and coming filmmakers can't be
Right,
held
right.
responsible for the entire history of Hollywood and slavery and all that stuff.
Yeah, but when you get to the point where you are making multiple movies and you're being programmed at IFC Center and you're getting a New York Times press, it might be a good idea to suggest, hey, let's diversify a little bit. I mean, having been a filmmaker who's been programmed at events, if I say, can we also add this filmmaker, the programmers would think about it. It's like you and I talking about a show, right? And we're all talking about white filmmakers, or let's say Sri Lankan filmmakers. And I say, or you say, why don't we add Jim Jarmusch? I would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's spread it up. I mean,
yeah,
because in filmmaking, money and press, all that stuff comes with being programmed into high-profile events. That's basically what I'm talking about. I wasn't saying these poor young white filmmakers are responsible for 150 years of problems. I just wanted more inclusion, especially in New York.
Yeah, well, I think
we agree basically on this stuff.
Yeah. And now we're going to talk about a film from a white
film. It's a big topic. It's an ongoing topic.
Right, but I would say now we're getting ready to talk about one of the whitest independent films you could possibly have. It's about a middle-aged white actress and her white niece visiting from Brooklyn and hanging out at their really posh sort of beachfront California apartment and getting high and having sex.
Well, that's fine. That's just what the movie is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my experience with Swanberg has been kind of. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have a question. He's from Chicago.
Yeah.
And you and your friends, other critics and filmmakers, probably saw him rising up in his profile. What was the reaction in Chicago amongst people to Swanberg's work?
I'm not the guy to ask about that because I'm like with everything. I'm not hip. I caught on to Swanberg. The first I think I knew about him. I've seen his movies all out of order, and I haven't seen all of them by any means. And I think I saw him when he was already big. The first one I can recall seeing, it was actually at the Chicago Critics Film Festival, I want to say, was Digging for Fire.
Oh yeah, that was like one of his biggest ones.
Yeah, and that was a movie where I think I had heard about it, like, oh, he's an indie director and all this other stuff. I'm like, okay, he's got Anna Kendrick and Jake Johnson and Brie Larson running around in his movie, and
Legolas was in his movie.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, I guess, but it's when I saw some of the films that had come out prior to that, I'm like, okay, I get it, because he evolves, like as he's becoming more professional in his filmmaking, and I assume he's becoming a bigger name. He's got more people that want to work with him and all that stuff. But so yeah, I haven't liked all of his stuff. I mean, Drinking Buddies was another one that was kind of big for him, and I didn't really care for that too much. I want to say it was Happy Christmas, I think, was with Melanie Linsky. I thought that was pretty good.
I liked Digging for Fire. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I dug it. It got a little bit, weird towards the end, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and like a lot of filmmakers we talk about in our show, his stuff is an acquired taste. You have to get to know Swanberg movies, and you figure out what you like about them, and some of them work, some of them don't, because they're largely improvised movies. It's not like he's working with a great script that was polished for 2 years,
Right. And I think I respond to him more when he's not trying to quote unquote make a movie, like have a big plot involved. Like All the Light in the Sky, I think was it's a great little film and a fun kind of character piece. That there isn't really a plot. It's just stuff happens, but there's no forward momentum, there's no twists, they're not working towards some kind of an ending, right? and that's the kind of stuff that I really respond to in his work. I think the
like
writing is
portraits of characters.
right. I mean, I think that the writing of the characters, even though it's improvised. I mean, this film was written by Swanberg and his lead actress Jane
Yeah,
Addams,
yeah.
and I think I would like to see a documentary or a movie about them making this movie, like writing and collaborating and bouncing ideas off of each other, because there are a lot of ideas in this film that do feel very much of its era, because this is 2012. This is 9 years ago.
Right.
Lots happened in 9 years, particularly in culture, in feminism, and what I'll call wokeism. There are some conversations in this movie I don't think you can have characters having in a modern film, ones that are not very flattering to the protagonist, but which don't see her as a victim of anything. She's it's kind of like the dark side of the strong independent woman who don't need no man. It's like, well, that can end up in loneliness and realizing some things kind of too late, but there is an inherent amount of beautiful dignity in this portrayal. I feel
this
like
is something I like about indie movies in general. There's more space to capture real life, reflect on real life conditions and perspectives. Whereas Hollywood movies, they're really plot driven. They don't really have time to, for that actress to talk about aging. There's a plot point to get to.
Right, and it's fun. It's weird because I actually interviewed Jane Addams last year for a great movie she did, Amy Simons's She Dies Tomorrow.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah, it's really cool. And she's was also older in that movie, and it was just nice to see, because we're talking about Hollywood movies all the time. Aside from like the established kind of royalty actresses who became big when they were young and then just kind of stuck through the decades, like a Glenn Close, like Julia Roberts, you don't see a whole lot of middle-aged, really strong, just like actors and actresses. You see a lot of movie stars kind of hanging on, but it's just nice to see. And this isn't any kind of knock on Jane Addams, like, oh, she's old. She is an older woman, and there is a lot to appreciate about seeing an older woman, about hearing an older actress's perspective, even if she is playing an actress, possibly a version of herself. It's refreshing. I mean, it's kind of like hanging out at the beach, listening to people you don't get to hear from very often.
That guy who played kind of her boyfriend, Larry Fessenden, he's a filmmaker. He's a famous filmmaker in New York.
I knew the name. I don't know. I can't say that I've ever seen one of his films. What should I have seen by Larry Fessenden?
I haven't really watched a lot of his movies because he makes horror movies, indie horror. So Google him, you'll see. You may see some titles that you may have heard of. I just know that he's been making movies in New York for a long time, and like a T West is in the cast. A lot of or Ty West.
It's Ty. Yeah, I think it's Ty.
Ty West. Yeah.
And there's a brief cameo. I think it's by Simon Barrett, who is also in that kind of collaboration. He's written movies with Adam Wingard, who is also kind of part of that whole collection. And now Adam Wingard is making like Godzilla movies and stuff, right? But yeah, I think Simon Barrett, you see him for like a split second. It's in that montage where they're at the movie theater and with Ty West and the niece character Faye.
Before we get too deep into this movie, let's spend a few minutes on Chicago indie filmmaking. I was thinking about Chicago indie filmmakers.
All right.
I came up with the list: Swanberg, James Fotopoulos.
Yeah.
However you pronounce his name, I could be wrong. He's an underground filmmaker who's made like 100 movies. And Nick Alonso, you're a big fan of his. Chris Ray, who you've had on.
Yep.
Michael Glover Smith.
Michael Glover Smith, yeah.
Glover Smith. That's Charles Borg, who worked on Amir Motless Man. We had Amir on. Charles was the co-writer. That's all I can think of. How about you?
Oh, I know you're putting me on the spot here. There are a couple that I'm thinking of and I'm completely blanking on right now.
But Nick Alonso's work you like a lot, right?
Oh yeah. Nick's a buddy, and actually I had him on for his last film, The Big Zip, last year, which was one of my favorite movies of the year. Awesome. I'm a big fan of people who can like really showcase Chicago and make it, look really sexy and cool and show us parts of the city that or even the suburbs that we don't get to see on film. It's not all just like sweeping shots of, Sears Tower or Willis Tower. Claire Cooney, she's a multi-hyphenate. She's an actress, producer, writer, director. Actually works with Michael Glover Smith. His starred in his last movie, and I think is in town actually right now filming, getting ready to film his next movie, which is starting soon. So yeah, she's great. She did a film called Runner last year, and she's got a new short out, which I haven't watched yet. It's on my list of things to do. Yeah, but there's some, every time we talk about this and we bring up Chicago filmmaking, I'm like, I know a handful of Chicago filmmakers, and I know there's got to be hundreds running around, if not thousands, but.
Right. They'll all email you tomorrow.
Yeah.
They'll all email you after the show goes out.
Send me the master list.
Me?
Well, if and this is an open invitation for anyone who's watching this, feel free to drop your website or your details in the comments, and I'll check you out. We'll check you out because we're all about discovering the indie talent here. And yes, my comments on the race of filmmakers earlier, please don't take that to mean I only want to hear from white filmmakers or something. That's definitely not the case. But yeah,
you're emailing someone back. This looks interesting, but since you're not white, well, I don't think we can include you in the show.
Oh no!
But no, So and especially in our new show, I'll keep track of filmmakers, Chicago and elsewhere. In our new show, we can do a segment on interesting filmmakers who are up and coming, or just interesting filmmakers, period. Also, there's a lot of documentary filmmakers in Chicago, and a lot of filmmakers who come out of the Columbia College Chicago, where I went to school.
Yeah, I want to mention Dan and Jeremy Eden. They're a couple of friends of mine who are they're brothers, and they make
the
movies
Eden
together.
Brothers.
Yeah, the Eden Brothers. Yeah, they actually have a show called 90 Under 90, which I appear on every
I've
month.
heard of it.
Yeah, it's 90 movies under 90 minutes, and we get on and they do these obsessive like scene by scene breakdowns of the movies, and it's very funny. But they just had a film come out late last year or very early this year, time means nothing, called an intervention, which is very good. So they're really talented guys. They used to write a lot of I know Jeremy used to write a lot of plays and burlesque shows.
All right. Let's not forget Jerry Sklar.
Oh, Jerry, yeah.
Right.
See, this is the problem. You put me on the spot, and it's like a lot of these are people that I kind of know, or I see their stuff, and I see a lot of movies. So it's kind of like when you say, "You're a funny guy, tell us a joke," and then everything just completely wipes out.
That's right.
Yeah. But
his movie sounds very interesting. I haven't seen it yet, but I saw your coverage of the movie.
Yeah, just for anyone here who's watching and may not be familiar, Tom of Your Life. I'll say it a little slower. Tom of Your Life, not Time of Your Life. Tom of Your Life is now streaming on Amazon Prime. You can watch for free if you're a subscriber there. So yeah, definitely check it out. Filmed in Chicago on a nothing budget. I think if nothing else, you'll appreciate what he can do with very little money. And as we talked about in my interview with Jerry Sklar, pulling
That's
strings.
A tough name to pronounce.
Yeah, it's short for Sklar. Yeah, it's short for Jeremy, but he goes by Jerry. Yeah, so yeah, good stuff. But okay,
and one more thing, editing is coming along well on Slow Romance. Couple more days, I should be able to start sending it out to festivals. I went back and cut some stuff and trying to get it down to close to 90 minutes. Might be 100 minutes, 115 minutes with credits. Initial cut was 2 hours, and I'm trying to make it a little bit shorter.
Did you show it to Aaliyah and other people?
No, not yet.
No, okay. All right. I wasn't sure because I know you mentioned that you had scheduled something, so I wasn't sure if this is feedback coming out of that, or you're just tightening it up before you blast it out into the world. Got it.
Yeah. Once I have a cut, I'll show it to Leah, and then I'll send it to you also, and it'll go out to Facets. Yeah, I'm going after all the big U.S. festivals. Let's see what happens.
All right. Okay, so All the Light in the Sky. We've kind of talked about it. I gave a brief synopsis, I think, at the beginning. Again, there's not a whole lot to this film. It's an aging actress who's, she's in her mid 40s. She's still trying to get roles, and the role she's up for, like, there's one she was up for a movie. It's her between her and another actress, and then there's an indie movie, but it may not have any money associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the more interesting things, and this got me thinking about the art of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
There's and this is where I think the title comes from. She has to go talk to a scientist as research for a role about this device that captures and reads and measures sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
And these scenes in particular between her and this guy, I mean, they get into a little bit of relationship stuff because beyond just the science, they spend some time together. So they're kind of like making small talk and figuring out their personal lives and things. But it got me to wondering this sort of like wonderful meta moment where you've
Mm-hmm.
got Jane Addams talking to this character as herself an actress preparing for a role. And then I started thinking about Swanberg and Adams talking about going out and finding a scientist, because like, oh, what kind of a weird profession would make for an interesting, movie type role? Oh, what about someone who measures the sunlight? Where do we find someone like that? Did they have to interview people? Did those conversations kind of go like they do in this movie? So there's all these different layers of storytelling, which in the absence of a forward plot, it gives you as much, if not more, to think about.
Yeah, I really liked those scenes kind of are not really necessary for the movie, but I like being dropped into this weird world where these two are talking about an interesting subject. I mean, those scenes could just be taken out and put up as little video clips, and people would find them interesting.
I think I agree to a point, but I think it's sort of
It shows her life.
It does, and it shows, like, you can really see Adams in that moment. And you're saying that Swanberg improvises a lot of his movies. This guy is spitting out all this jargon. He's explaining the little parts of these
Right.
devices and what they do and how they interact. At one point, they pop open like a circuit panel to look at how all the different parts are powered, and you can see her asking these questions, and she's trying to understand, I think, at a base level, what he's doing and what his job is. I don't know if any of it's related to the script, but she's just trying to get into the mind of this person.
Mhm.
So I can see her as an actress trying to figure out this character who's also an actress, trying to figure out how much of this do I need to remember? How much of it am I just trying to kind of absorb? So when I talk, I can sound like I'm talking naturally as if I went to school for this. That stuff is really kind of fascinating. I think it's more
prep,
interesting than,
filmmaking prep.
yeah, but it's more interesting to me than the whole kind of plot of like jumping in and out of bed and will they, won't they kind of stuff we see later in the
Nice.
movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, so any filmmakers who make movies about technology, send them to Ian.
I'm all for it. Not that I'll understand it, but
Yeah. How did you like the cinematography? One of the things that stands out in this movie, and I like to watch this movie every winter because it's like a chill, beach time, but it's not summer. It feels a little bit like fall, but the great visuals. I mean, kind of like Man in that sense. It's a great movie to put on and just escape to.
yeah, I agree. I do like it's it's very odd because I like not only what the film is showing, but what it's saying about what it's showing me. You always think about, you see these glamorized TV shows of people living in these huge beach houses or beach apartments, like, oh my god, it's so cool, you live on the beach. Even Faye, the niece who comes to visit, who's like 23 or 25, she's like, oh
Mhm.
my god, you're living in paradise, you wake up to the ocean every day. But what I
I'd be
like,
afraid to live in that building.
yeah, well, I would too, for the reasons the characters lay out, later on with the inclement weather and erosion and all of
Yeah,
that.
plus sharks could get in.
Sharks, sure. You got to watch out for those sharknadoes too.
Yeah, talented sharks.
But what I liked is the deromanticizing of it, because as much as Marie, Jane Addams' character, is living in paradise, she's still got this, weird, messy, complicated life to figure out. So it almost doesn't matter where she's living, she almost can't really see it anymore. I mean, she goes out kind of paddle boarding, and that's her recreation with Rusty, Larry Fessenden's character. But it's, again, this isn't a movie where she's going to get into the perfect relationship by the end, or have some big profound thing, or get that dream part that's finally going to make her a big star. She's just kind of left with herself. And this, the last shot of the film is her paddling out into this great giant world, which is beautiful, but ultimately doesn't necessarily care about her. She just has to kind of take care of herself, which I think oddly dovetails into the environmental message that they're getting into. Like, you have to start, make sure that you're taken care of, and then, take care of the planet.
Were you allowed to watch the nudity in the movie?
Was I allowed to watch the nudity? What do you mean?
By whoever makes the rules about that kind of stuff at your house?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
No.
We're no stranger to nudity in the Simmons household.
That's right.
I watched this movie by myself, and that, get those thoughts out of your minds, kids. No, that's the other thing I appreciated is, this is very matter-of-fact nudity.
Typical of Swanberg, to show nudity that is desexualized, or it's not even really necessary, but he shows it.
Yeah, and I almost forgot that I was watching a Swanberg film, because the opening scene is Jane Addams waking up, realizing that she's got to get down to the beach to go paddleboarding, and so she strips completely naked, and then squeezes herself into this wetsuit, and you see everything. I'm like, is this necessary? I don't know that I should be watching this, but I'm like, oh, that's right, that's Swanberg. It's not, this isn't, I think most other directors, you'd be like, oh, see, we got some ladies, we got some flesh, huh? Come see my movie. But right. No, that's not the point of this film. It's to show the realism and the mundaneness of this activity, and also that, yeah, she's got to get naked to get into this wetsuit, but she's also kind of very frantic, and she's struggling with the zipper, so it's kind of funny, but it's not like, sexy funny. It's just like, I hope she can get that zipper on. Get that on.
I don't think I've ever heard him explain why he uses the nudity in his movies, but I think early on he started using it as a device to telegraph that he's trying to get as real as possible with things. And I don't know if that works, but it's just a part of his filmmaking.
Yeah, and I think it's the way he handles not only nudity but also sexuality, I think, is key to what he's thinking about, because later on in the movie there are a couple of scenes that could have very much led to graphic sex scenes. One of them doesn't lead to anything, and the other is becomes kind of like this playful, where she's on the couch with that one guy. I can't remember his name, but he's the dude that she ultimately thought was a nice guy, but he just kind of disappears from the movie. Where they're,
is that the Larry Fessenden character? Oh, no. Is that the niece? Are you talking about the niece?
The niece's friend. They're all like, he comes into the kitchen while she's doing the blender, and she's showing him the kale smoothie, and he's like, I'm really high right now, and that's sort of the beginning.
I forget who that was.
Right, but when they finally decide they're going to seal the deal, he's kind of between her legs, but she's got her legs up, and he's sort of in between, and they're almost like doing an amusement park ride or something. They're turning into like a silly game. It's cute stuff, and it's affectionate, and it's weird and clumsy, just like human sexuality can be.
That's an interesting aspect of Swanberg movies. Another thing I liked about the movie, I think primarily why this movie stands out is because of Jane Addams, and probably what she contributed to her character and the script. It feels almost not like a Swanberg movie, this movie.
How do you mean?
Because a lot of regular movies use scripts that think out character motive, plots, when things happen. They seem like they're artificial things, but very cohesive. The world is presented in a way that makes sense. It's more even and balanced, right? Swanberg shoots scenes and then edits down a movie from the scenes he has. So, but a lot of the scenes are not played as they would unfold in a regular scripted movie. So I can feel the difference between one of his regular movies and like a scripted movie, right? Or even a scripted indie movie that was shot fast. Now this one feels like it was much more of a scripted, thought out, at least when it comes to showing the character, showing Jane Addams's character.
Yeah, it does have
It
that.
felt far less off the cuff.
It felt far less off the cuff, but it also felt somehow like more authentic to me, in the sense that again, I'm curious to see how much of this script was Swanberg and how much was Adams. Like, if he just said, I have an idea for a movie about an actress who's kind of going through some stuff and her niece comes to visit. I need you to help me make this as authentic, as possible, because I'm not a woman. I'm not, 45 or whatever. And how much of it was Adams just kind of pouring her own experience into it, or imagining that, because I don't want to ascribe the Marie character to Jane Addams and say that this is who she is.
Created a character, maybe.
But I also believe she's so believable in this part that I believe that I wouldn't be surprised if she was like, yeah, this is me, in the movie, with the contrivance of, I've got this niece and this kind of a roommate or a guy who shares the building with me that kind of flirting with, but he also likes younger women, so it's never going to happen.
Whatever contributions Jane Addams made, plus her acting, plus the way Swanberg shot it, I think this was a 1 or 2 person crew shoot. So good for indie filmmakers to watch this. You can capture good sound and capture good visuals even by yourself or with a crew of 2. And how it's edited, everything came together in a better way than a lot of his earlier movies for me on this one. So that's one of the things I like about this. One interesting thing about Swanberg's career is the New Yorker critic Richard Brody was an early champion of his and stayed a champion of his work. And he somehow saw potential in Swanberg that lots of other critics didn't. You have any thoughts on that?
On Richard Brody, or the whole idea
of Richard Brody being able to say, you know what, this filmmaker may not show what people are looking for now, but I'm going to start paying attention, writing about it. At one point, he was like the only critic who was saying anything positive about Swanberg. But then, like 5 years later, the people came around. What was he able to see that a lot of people were not able to see?
I don't know. I haven't.
Maybe he's just seen a lot of movies and he's seen this kind of pattern.
Well, it could just be something that's personal, like something resonated with Swanberg's movies for him. Maybe he saw someone who he thought was talented, had potential, but the earlier films, which I have not seen, but as you described them, were perhaps not as polished, certainly, as what he would be doing, 15 years later. But if you watch someone and something connects with you, like I'll say, like with the films of Michael Glover Smith, with Nick Alonso's movies. I mean, Nick in particular is someone I discovered, or was shown to me a few years ago, and he's made quite a few movies between then. And to watch the evolution of not only the resources that he has, but the idea, the acting, the editing, everything. He keeps evolving to the point where every time I watch a movie, I'm like, why doesn't everybody know about this guy? So I imagine if anything similar like that was going on in Richard Brody's head with Joe Swanberg, he was probably championing him every chance he got. Maybe just that little bit of encouragement could have been what helped Swanberg keep going. I'm not in Swanberg's head either, but if you've got people saying, what is this mumblecore nonsense? Save up some money, get a budget, make a real movie. But then you've got someone saying, no, I what you're doing here is special to you. I recognize something in it. Keep going. I think about, famously, Siskel and Ebert championed Martin Scorsese when he was in a down period in the early 80s, and he was all depressed and he was, not wanting to make movies anymore. Like, no, Scorsese is still relevant. He's still, has a lot of great work in him. And he went on to have arguably, a better second half of his career than a first, at least in terms of, hits. And
also, Siskel and Ebert saved My Dinner with Andre. That was about to be closed down. Then they gave it a positive review. Then it ran for another year plus in New York.
Damn, I don't think I knew about that.
Yeah, wow. They saved it.
And see, that's it's probably a different conversation now because we're in the digital age. But constantly the question is, what good are film critics? And
they're good. They can be very useful.
Yeah,
I mean, Richard Brody is not not nobody. He's like a giant. And New Yorker is a very influential publication. So if Richard Brody likes your work, other people can say, well, you know what? I don't know much about how great this stuff is, but Brody likes it. Now I can program it. I have a reason to excuse my selection.
Yeah, I think it's the advocacy. I mean, the day-to-day stuff of like thumbs up, thumbs down, what's it doing on the tomato meter? I can understand how people get turned off by that and be like, well, it's just someone's opinion. But the people who really know film and advocate for it and really care about it enough to, write about it passionately and evangelize to other people and, try and clue folks into stuff they might not see, but which they might appreciate. I think that's a very critical, no pun intended, role.
Good job, critics who do that. Also, yes. Speaking of Chicago film, Charles Coleman, programmer at Facet, said that in 2013 he showed Swanberg's movie, and I think he liked the movie a lot. And Swanberg was there for a Q&A. So everyone support Facets.
Yes, and also that screening of Digging for Fire, that was at the Music Box, and Swanberg was there as well. Awesome. And I think I hope I get this right. I think he was with Chris, who at that point I believe was Chris Swanberg, who's now Chris Ray. I believe they were together at that point. I met both of them briefly after the screening, but I had no real context for Swanberg outside of that movie. So, and I think, he might have been in one of Ty West's other horror films, the thing he did about the cult, which I didn't think was very good, but he was acting in that, not directing. But
he's made a bunch of movies. He's made like maybe 30 movies by now.
Yeah, and he's also, that's the whole thing about this little kind of squad we're talking about with Swanberg and Wingard and a bunch of, and Barrett and other people. They have made different movies with each other's in different capacities. Like Ty West, he's a horror filmmaker who shows up in this movie, and he also showed up in You're Next. I think Wingard directed that, and so all kind of like incestuously popping up in other people's stuff, which I think is great. But it has made me appreciate, like, I would rather see Ty West behind the camera than in front of the camera.
Got it.
And Swanberg too, for that matter.
No, I mean, he's all right. Depends on the project and depends on what you're in the mood for. Also, the opposite of the Richard Brody experience was Glenn Kenny. He's a famous, well-known critic. I think he was the critic for Premiere magazine, and now he writes for lots of different outlets. He didn't like Swanberg's work at all. And then later on, he warmed up to it. And another interesting situation was the critic Devin Faraci and Swanberg boxed. They had a boxing fight because Devin Faraci hated Swanberg's work so much. Swanberg's like, all right, we'll have a debate, then we'll have a boxing match. Did you see that link? I sent it to you, right?
I don't know if you did send. I don't know if I saw it. Well, I didn't see it. I don't remember you sending it to me, but I'll have to look for it. Devin Faraci, that's a name I haven't heard in forever. I think he also
got pushed out because of a sexual issue.
That's right. He got Me Too, right? My recollection is at one point I think he boxed Uwe Boll, the filmmaker. Yeah, I think that was.
I know Uwe Boll boxed some people, but Devin Faraci got beat up. I mean, he lost that fight, but
from Swanberg.
Yeah, Swanberg won.
That's awesome.
Swanberg, I mean, he was a clear winner. I don't think Farage put any work into it. But these are very bizarre things. I mean, indie filmmakers boxing film critics, that's just not a thing that happens. But so in many ways, Swanberg's career is very unique, and there are some great lessons in there for indie filmmakers. Keep making your movies, ignore the critics. Eventually people will come around. If you like doing the work. Plus, did you watch his Netflix shows? I saw a couple episodes. They get some good feedback from people.
The Netflix shows like Love.
Easy, I think he did Easy.
Oh, Easy, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I should have, because I know it's got a bunch of people in there that I like, and
a bunch of Chicago.
Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I just never made time for it because TV is
You're
kind of a
busy.
dicey proposition. Well, it's like it's do I watch Easy or do I watch the new Bachelorette?
That's right. No, Easy's supposed to be good.
Yeah, I'll put that on my list.
Yeah, you probably like it.
What we need to do, we need to come up with a new podcast series about Easy now that it's been off the air for like 2 years. And so I'll have an excuse to watch each episode.
Yeah, we'll work it into the new show.
No, but yeah, with Swanberg, I mean, with all the light in the sky, in particular, like, what did you make of? You said you watched this movie, a lot, like each year you put it on.
Once every winter I watch.
Once every winter. Is it just the kind of the chill vibe that keeps you coming back, or is there anything in the story or the characters are sort of revealed to you when you from time to time that you watch it? Do you learn new things, or is it really just kind of this white noise to get through the winter?
No, it's a nice sort of like a mini vacation, kind of like the same way I feel about Amir Madla's movie Man. That guy's got apples or oranges. He's hanging out with his dogs in California. Lady comes to visit. He's got a nice life. In the same way, the Jane Addams character has a nice house. She's getting some work done, exploring sunlight engineering and going out to the ocean, which looks great. So it's like a nice warm escape from, warm in a sense, and comfortable escape from cold Brooklyn in winter.
Definitely.
And, yeah, and the acting work is good, and the way it reflects kind of showbiz, film world, indie film realities, which my movie does a lot, and you'll see when you see it. It's the kind of stuff I'm into.
Now, the one, two things I wanted to ask you about. One came up earlier, I forgot about it. I'm picking up again before I forget again. Mm-hmm. In terms of scripting, we were talking about, you had said that this feels like a very scripted movie that is sort of meant to, yeah, but it's meant to feel natural. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where Marie, the Jane Addams character, is, I don't know if I think it's Dan. I'll say it's Dan. Kent Osborne, the character that she kind of develops a thing. Yeah, develops a thing with the younger guy who's kind of the stoner, helps her fix the toilet, helps her put up a coat rack. It's very kind of fun bonding stuff. They put up this coat rack, and later on, after she breaks up with him without breaking up with him, it's a very kind of a cold way to cut things off. Mm-hmm. She goes back into her apartment. First thing she does, she tries to hang up her coat, and the coat rack falls down. Mm-hmm. Now, that is a very cute kind of a scripted thing, like a metaphor for, the whole relationship and her whole love life is falling to the floor in a big heap. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was purposeful. That also felt like a kind of thing where they're just shooting some stuff, and she came in and threw her coat up in the deal, and it just wasn't put up very well, and it just fell down. And Swanberg's like, I can use this. Maybe people think it's a metaphor for the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's how it happened. I mean, I have no idea, but sounds like they got the shot. And this happens even in the scripted movies. Accidents happen, and you're like, you know what? In the edit, I can move it to a certain place, and then this would reflect off of this earlier scene I had.
Yeah.
Now, when I said this was scripted, this feels scripted in relation to earlier Swanberg movies. But it's possible he used the same process. It's just because of the addition of Jane Addams and the character she created and the way the movie is shot and edited, it feels like it's better thought out, more cohesive, like a scripted movie that I see by other filmmakers.
Yeah. And the last point is Sophia Takal, who plays Faye, the niece. She's very good. Yeah, I hadn't seen her in other stuff. Have you seen her in other movies?
Yeah, I don't recall which ones, but she's been in a bunch of movies.
The thing that struck out to me, and this is not to take anything away from her performance, but she bears a weird resemblance to Anna Kendrick. And this is like a year. This is a year or two before he started casting Anna Kendrick in all the movies.
Yeah. Those two get that. I think there are videos about each one complaining about saying, "I'm not Anna Kendrick. I'm not Sophia Takal."
No, because I feel like this is going to sound so cruel, but like what we were talking about earlier, as Swanberg gets bigger, he starts getting bigger stars. I'm wondering if he's like, for my next movie, I need an Anna Kendrick type. Well, you've got me. No, I want Anna Kendrick.
That's right. No, who knows? I know he did say that in his movies are still low budget indie affairs, that he gets actors when they're available, and sometimes people he wants to work with are doing Marvel movies or just can't take time out to spend a month doing a no budget project when they're getting paid millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So I think he works with whoever's available.
Yeah. I do, as much as we rag on Hollywood and stuff, I do love that is still a thing that happens, where you get actors who believe in indie filmmakers or up and comers, whether it's because they think that they're hot and it's a good PR move, or maybe they just have a connection through people. It's more
interesting work, I think.
Right, but it's just nice to see that they'll show up in these bit parts. And it's also cool when you see like Brie Larson, who I mentioned. I recognize her from oh my God, James Ponsold's movie, Spectacular Now.
Hey, James Ponsold once came over to where I lived in Maryland and crashed over in a really crowded apartment that I lived in, because he was in town and his first movie with Nick Nolte was coming out, and we met up and did an interview and we hung out.
Oh, and nice.
That's my James Ponsold story.
Well, I love the Spectacular Now, and Brie Larson had a bit part in that, I think, as she
was in a bunch of indie stuff. Also, Black Widow. She was. What was that?
A Short Term 12, which I haven't seen. That was like one of her breakout things, along with, I guess, Ryan Gosling. No, that was something else. But
also, Black Widow was in that crazy art house movie, Mysterious Skin, right? No, not Mysterious Skin.
Under the Skin.
Under the Skin, yeah.
Yeah, but Scarlett Johansson was already huge by that time.
Was she famous by then? Okay.
Oh yeah, her big breakout, I think, was Ghost World.
Oh, okay, yeah, that was a while back. But she hadn't done Black Widow yet, right?
No, she had. She hadn't done. I think she had been in Iron Man 2, which is like the intro to Black Widow. But yeah,
she's a good actress. I like her.
Oh yeah. I'm a Scarlett Johansson fan. ScarJo. But no, what I'm saying is, it's cool to see like Brie Larson starting out in like a bit part in a James Ponsold movie, kind of getting a bit part in a Swanberg film, and then she's Captain Marvel. Now I don't well, she was in Room first, that was she won the Oscar and all that stuff, but it's just neat to see the evolution of these actors and even filmmakers, because you see a lot of indie folks going in and swinging for the fences on the big budget Marvels, and DC films.
It's a small world. When I get the call to make the slow cinema version of the Avengers hanging out at their building for 16 hours, I'm gonna take it.
You could just that will be Marvel Phase 6. That'll be the 16-hour Avengers movie. All the whole phase, just that one film.
That's right. Also, Amy Seimetz, she was in one of Swanberg movies. She had a big role in Silver Bullets. So check out that one if you get a chance. It's a movie about a Swanberg character trying to make a werewolf movie, and Amy Seimetz is in it. And then now she's in much bigger movies like Alien movies.
Yeah, I interviewed her for the Pet Cemetery remake a couple years ago. Yeah, it was very nice. She had a cold when I, I talked to her. I felt so bad.
Yeah, she's a good filmmaker and actress. She sent me one of her first movies a long time ago about it's like a short movie that she did with James Ponsoldt, like way before anyone was famous.
All of these people know each other.
Yeah,
You guys are all hanging out. That's
everyone knows each other. Yeah, that's the thing about the film world. Everyone knows each other or ends up crossing paths. So you got to be chill with everyone.
Yeah.
And which I'm not sometimes, but I have to remind myself to be chill. Anyway, she sent a documentary she made about like a mermaid aquarium in Florida. I forget the title, but it was nice. It was a nice little documentary.
Cool. Yeah.
Fake mermaids, not real ones.
Well, yeah, of course. But yeah, definitely check out She Dies Tomorrow, because that movie is a trip. But yeah, well, do you have anything else to say about All the Light in the Sky? We've been bouncing all around this this show, and I think that's partially not the fault of, but it's a consequence of All the Light in the Sky being a movie where there's a few things to talk about, but it's more just a movie to experience. We can't talk about.
Go ahead. Yeah, I like podcasts where you start, you keep the kind of like Swanberg movies where you have a central focus on a few things, but it goes all over the place. So, we talked about Chicago indie filmmakers, my project, upcoming projects, critical reaction to Swanberg, and the movie itself. And overall, I'd say the mumblecore filmmaking thing was very good for indie filmmaking because it kind of showed the older filmmakers you don't really have to spend 5 years raising $2 million to make a movie. You can just go out and shoot stuff and keep doing it and keep doing it. And you can ignore, and this is Swanberg specifically, you can ignore critics, and some festivals will support you, some critics will support you. So I think from like a film artist working perspective, more people should get into Swanberg and his career and the way of doing things. What happens a lot is a filmmaker makes one movie, gets bad reviews because it's tough in a short period of time to make a great movie. Most likely they have to cut corners. Then they're never heard from again because they get discouraged. They get out. It's tough to get back into it. So if nothing else, Swanberg is a good example of filmmaking and art making perseverance that pays off.
Definitely. Now, one thing I want to not push back on, but kind of push back on, when you say filmmakers need to ignore critics, when they get the bad press,
to a degree.
To a degree, I think it's maybe not healthy if you're getting all bad press to sit there and read that deluge, but I think getting a sampling and at least understanding what the criticism is to see if it's just oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or the story is terrible, the idea is, but if it's something like I couldn't understand what they were saying because the sound mix was off, then that's that's something you can take into your next picture. Oh, I need to make sure the sound is pristine. It was like, well, the story was kind of disjointed, it was all over the place, maybe take that to heart in the next one, unless that's your kind of your thing. Well, I'm going to be the confusing storyteller, the filmmaker,
or the low budget Christopher Nolan.
Yeah,
make it difficult for people to hear things.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. But no, so I think that's kind of a key thing is because critics, by and large, we don't enjoy crapping on filmmakers.
Right.
It's just that we also don't enjoy being subjected to crappy films. So sometimes we get a little grumpy and maybe a little bit too gleeful at the keyboard when we're unloading on stuff. But we love movies, we love filmmakers, we love, storytelling, and we want people to be presenting us with the best that they possibly can. That sounds very highfalutin and everything. But one thing I also want to mention, we were talking about film critic advocacy. Someone I had forgotten about because we've been talking a lot about, again, white filmmakers here, but Roger Ebert was also a huge early champion of Ava DuVernay, and she has credited him with, I think helping to get her, get attention on her and be very supportive, when he was alive, obviously, of her, growth. And now she's got a pop figure, for crying out loud. You can buy it at Target. Like, they've got these little director series of Ava DuVernay pop figures. So yeah, I love this discussion.
Yeah, it's a good discussion. We always have good discussions. No, as an artist, listen to what everyone has to say to a degree and forget about it. Get back to your work, and whatever points other people made that are worthy, that'll stick with you. And I started getting more serious about image quality and sound quality over the last couple of movies. Earlier, I wasn't really into it, but because I know the story and I can sort of have a good time with my own movies because I kind of know the story, right? But I realized that a film critic watching it for the first time, if the image is not as the best it could be, that's going to affect how they receive the entire story.
Right.
So I put more time into it.
Yeah, and you're not sitting there with the film critic in the screening or at their home
To
saying,
explaining,
yeah, like, oh, I ran out of money, or it was supposed to be this thing, but I had to settle. It ultimately doesn't matter.
Yeah, and film critics help you see the movie from the perspective of an outsider who knows film but may not know your film. So that's a valuable perspective to have.
That's great. Yeah, that's totally true. All right, sir. Well, we will be back next month talking about
we're doing
Barry Jenkins, right?
Barry Jenkins' first movie. Great, another great filmmaker who came out around the same time as Swanberg.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting.
And by then, I think you would have seen the Secret Society for Slow Romance. Hopefully by Wednesday the 15th, it'll be done.
Oh, all right. Well, actually, coincidentally, that's the date this episode is supposed to drop. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Maybe you could watch a movie after that. No. I'm grateful for film critics overall because they help you find, long before people become filmmakers, they just watch movies. They help people find good stuff that may otherwise not be highlighted because, like Swanberg movies don't make a lot of money. So it's possible our discussion will lead someone to discover this movie and other Swanberg movies that could lead to greater things.
Yeah, or just discover the idea. And one of the things I love about Swanberg's work is, as you were saying, he makes, or at least starting out, made lots and lots of movies out of, kind of mundane, everyday things. You don't have to have this big grand plot. You can just shoot your life or a version of it, and people will be attracted to it and relate to it. So if you have these ambitions of being a filmmaker, he's just one of those, well, just go out and make the damn movie.
Right, get started.
Yeah.
And there was one other thing I wanted to say. What was it? Oh yeah, about race and cinema. That's a much bigger, it's like a 500-year-old problem, even though cinema's only 100.
I was gonna say.
No, I mean, how European descended people view things as it relates to minorities is shaped by hundreds of years of doctrine, ideas about, colonization, how to treat other people, blah, blah, blah. And it hasn't been, not everyone's on the same page. Like Ethan Hawke has a great movie about Good Lord Bird, about that guy who led a slave rebellion, a white guy who led a slave rebellion. That's supposed to be really good. I'll send you a link. So, and from the beginning, there was multiple perspectives in Europe and in America about how to interact with non-white people. So in another 100 years, we'll have true equality. We're on our way.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a whole other discussion. The other thing that kind of bugs me about this discussion is, Hollywood is probably the most liberal, progressive place you can imagine. So when they're talking about how much of a lack of, and when I say Hollywood, I don't mean just geographically like California. I mean just the entertainment industry. It's one of the wokest organizations you could possibly find on the planet, and yet they keep harping about how there's a need for representation and diversity. I'm like, well, who are you talking to? Are you talking to yourselves? I'm there watching the movies. I'm all there for it, but there's all this wrangling and haranguing about stuff. I'm like, well, just get to it. Start doing it.
Another problem is America is a huge place. People who come from Europe are shocked. People who visit, like my friends who visited, they're shocked at how huge America is, right? I mean, Europe.
Well, if they're visiting you in New York, I mean, New York is a country unto itself. It's so massive.
Yeah. So having one film industry that goes back to the birth of film in California, trying to make movies for 320 million people plus the world, you're going to leave a lot of people out. What we need is probably 50 different film industries, one for each state, because there's so much diversity in America. New York is so much different than, Kansas, for example.
Sure, but if you have 50 film industry, I mean, we're having trouble getting eyeballs on, in theatrical experiences for the one film industry that we have.
Because but that's because they have crazy expectations for return. There are countries in Europe that have 5 million people. They have their own industry. They make money making movies for the local audience. They were complaining about the In the Heights only making $10 million. That's
I heard it made
great
5.
amount of money. No, 11 for the weekend.
Okay.
That's a great amount of money, especially since it's playing at HBO for the first weekend after like a global disaster.
But it's not, because I mean, I have not seen In the Heights. I know a lot of people love it, but it's not a lot of money, because what you have to consider is
for the first weekend.
No, but what I'm saying is, for the first weekend,
it'll make the money back in a few months.
Possibly not, because how much did that movie cost to make?
But how much are they making on HBO?
Probably not as much as that's the thing.
They're not reporting the numbers.
Well, but that's the tricky part is, that I can't speak to how much they're making on HBO, because you're right, they're not reporting it. But that's something we're going to have to figure out with this traditional box office model. They are putting it in theaters. They are putting it on HBO Max, because I think they made that decision late last year when they announced, or earlier this year, that they're putting everything. Warner Brothers is putting their entire content on HBO Max, same day and date as movie theaters. I think they were still counting on the idea that we were going to be submersed in this pandemic, so people weren't going to be going out to the theaters, right? But you've got another, what was it that came out? What was the big movie? A Quiet Place 2 made like $50 million. That's the big crowd pleaser. It's also a sequel. It's a brand by now. In the Heights has Lin-Manuel Miranda as the sort of brand behind it, because he's the Hamilton guy. But Hamilton still is also a niche Broadway play. Yeah, you can watch it on Disney Plus, but honestly, how many people have watched it? It's like a niche of a niche of a niche. So when you say when you say it's going to make its money back, I feel like people are looking at this. The press, rightly or wrongly, they're saying, oh, it's this big musical that everyone's supposed to say everyone's going to go see. The projection was 20 million. It made 11. So the narrative is it didn't do as well as they were expecting. So if you're sitting there thinking, what am I going to see this week? Am I going to go see Fast and the Furious 9? Or am I going to go see this movie that didn't do as well as people thought it was by half? That must mean it's not any good. Oh, it's on HBO. Maybe I'll watch it later, but I'll probably forget about it by the time I get back from Fast and the Furious 9. I hate to call it a bomb, but the idea that movies now have legs past the first couple of weeks, if they don't make that big money, they're not going to make it. We have very few. I mean, you have to go back to you'd have to go back to The Greatest Showman, I think, from a few years ago to find something that came out, didn't do anything for a couple of weeks, and then became this massive success due to word of mouth. And that was even involving a pandemic.
Let's take a look at how much they said they spent on making it and marketing it. Let's see in a few months what the movie turns into. I think it'll be a very good success. It seems like it will be. I think everyone who's into musicals will go see it. Let's see. But
everyone who's into musicals, that's the other niche of a niche of a niche.
That aside, I still call for multiple film industries in the U.S., but you don't have to spend $100 million making a movie. Make it for $1 million and spend $1 million putting it out.
Well, I mean, you can do that with certain films, but I mean, you're not going to make the Marvel movies on $1 million.
No, of course, that's a different, genre of movies. I'm saying everyone else doesn't have to do that. You can make $1 million movie,
but
make $10 million back.
this gets back to the other idea. If you have 50 movie industries and they're all making $1 million movie that costs $2 million to make, you've got to get enough people to go see that movie and the other movies being put out by the 50 other movie industries, because they're not only just putting out one movie a year, they're going to be putting out 12 movies a year. So you've got over 100 of these, well, I can't do the math right now because it's late, but you've got a lot of movies that are multiple $1 million movies. You've got to get people.
To everyone. You don't need everyone. You need 100,000 people to see your movie to make $1 million. So,
yeah, and that's a dicey prospect, especially if you're talking about $1 million movies. You can do a lot with $1 million, granted, especially if you're talented. But in terms of the movies that people are going to leave their house to go see, that's a dicey prospect.
Smaller movies don't have to make their money back on theatrical. You know that Godard movie, Goodbye to Language, made $500,000 in U.S. theatrical. Can you believe that?
I guess. I mean, but over what period of time? And again,
over like a year.
Yeah, it took a year to make
over 60 some weeks, but that might be counting weeks at consecutive weeks happening at various theaters.
Right. And I'm saying investors in these movies, even $1 million movie, it's not an attractive proposition to say we're going to spend $200 million to make and market a film and hope to make $500,000 over the course of a year.
Yeah, people don't invest in movies to make money anyway. But maybe at the in the Heights level they do.
I understand. You're talking more of a creative standpoint and wanting to get more diversity of voices out there in film. I am with you on that, but I'm also talking from a business standpoint, because that's ultimately what this is. There's not.
No, it's right now, lots of movies get made and released that don't make money.
Right.
So it's not a business thing. It's not a.
But it is a business thing, because movies that come out or they get released and don't make money, if you invest in making a film, unless you are independently wealthy, or you have people, if you have people who are willing to invest that money. Okay, so let's say you've got an angel donor or a backer, like, I'm going to give you $25,000 to make this movie, and you make a movie and it comes out and does nothing, and maybe you lose money on it, and you go back and say, well, I just need another 25 grand to make this other movie. That person might say, okay, here you go, try it again.
We will do a show one day on indie film financing. You'll be shocked to learn what happens. But enough for this episode.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, what you're talking about, blowing this up to a national scale with all these different industries and everything, it's not tenable given the appetites of the people that are going to see movies, especially because before the pandemic happened, movie theaters, and we talked about this, movie theaters are on the decline. People are talking about, maybe we're just going to stream everything. In a market or in a model where streaming becomes the norm, maybe you could work something like that out, because you could shoot something that's more like television than a feature. I don't know. I don't have the answer. We'll know in a few years.
And Netflix is doing something like that. They've drastically increased how many movies they make. HBO, Apple, Amazon, they're all doing it. So this kind of a heavily competitive marketplace for movies that need to make money is coming, because studios that have stock owners and companies like Amazon, Netflix, Apple, that eventually need to make money from their film divisions will start worrying about that. But I think the 50, or it could be like 5 or 10. Atlanta's already up and coming. I think the multiple film centers is going to happen in US, because there's enough extra money. The filmmaking is much more possible now. You don't need Hollywood, and there's enough people in the small audiences that are into certain things. Anyway, we'll do multiple episodes on the film business in the future.
I'm sure this is planting a lot of seeds. I'm excited. Yeah. But all right. So started off as All the Light in the Sky. So
That's
we'll
right.
just, I think this episode might actually be longer than the movie at this point. So,
And actually, one more thing, yes.
okay.
Swanberg's career also is an example that you could keep making movies that don't make money and eventually get to a place where you make some money.
Yeah, but he makes enough money to make the next movie and to feed himself.
Yeah, sometimes he didn't.
Right. But I'm saying over the arc of his career,
Yes.
he's not sitting on Spielberg money.
Right.
You know, he's not even sitting on Wingard money because he's not directing Godzilla.
Yeah.
And that's fine for him. You know, he's got
other people, I'm saying if you want more diversity, that's one route. You can take the risk, make the movie, see what happens.
Yes. Always.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much,
Good
sir.
show.
I'm gonna, we're actually gonna sign off now before we go off on another half-hour tangent. This has been a blast.
Good job.
All right, sir. Well,
talk to you later in the week.
Yes, and I want to see that movie. Get it to me.
Will do.
All right, take care. Bye.
Yeah, signing up from space.
Roger that.